How y'all doing today, guys and gals? If there's any of y'all watching out there, I want to do another video on my Massey Ferguson. This is not going to be a review video. This is going to be more of a video for people that have a Massey Ferguson 4700 or are thinking about buying a Massey Ferguson 4700. And all of you that are just out there watching for fun, y'all are welcome to watch too. But I'm going to talk about several of the things that, let's call them tips and tricks, I guess, for the Massey 4700. Things that maybe not everybody that even owns one realizes about it, that I kind of take for granted maybe. I have talked about most of these things in previous videos, but I haven't put them all into one video, which is what I'm going to do right now.
Okay, I'm going to stop myself right here because I just told you a lie. I decided I'm going to break this video up into parts because I spend 26 minutes just talking about the air conditioning on this tractor. And I have several other topics I want to talk about on it, like lift arms and steering and a couple other things that I can't think of right now off the top of my head, but I'm going to I don't know how many parts I'm going to do yet, but when I get done, I'll put them in a playlist so they'll all play together if you choose that playlist. But I got to get all of them made first, and I'll post them as I make them. But also want to say that my dealer for this tractor, everybody told me that AGCO is terrible, that they won't take care of their customers, but I think a lot of people on the internet picked that up from Attitude Adjuster, which maybe that was true in his case, but I think the dealer is what makes all the difference. My dealer is Franklin Welding and Equipment, and they are in Rocky Mount, Virginia. If you're ever in Rocky Mount, Virginia, or if you live local to the area, you need to check them out. They normally keep a 4700 in stock. They got some New Holland stuff in stock. They sell Massey Ferguson and New Holland. But they've been excellent to work with. Any questions I've had about this tractor, any warranty issues I've had, have been taken care of promptly. Haven't had any trouble with AGCO on anything. They've put a cable on one of my remote valves, came to my place and done it. They put a new steering hydrostatic unit on because I had a complaint about notchy steering, which was there from the day I bought the tractor. I noticed it the day I bought it. I mentioned it to them. They said they'd take care of it, and he did. Um, and one other thing, oh, the dash had some moisture in it, and they were going to replace that. But we ended up taking it apart, and the moisture hadn't came back. We put it back together. The moisture hadn't come back since, but they did order a new one. It just hadn't got here yet. Not real concerned about it. I just didn't want moisture in my dash. Not sure how it got in there. I don't know if it just was in there from the factory or what. But all of a sudden one day, had a little spot of moisture in front of the fuel gauge. But they were going to replace the instrument cluster because of it. So can't say enough about Franklin Welding and Equipment in Rocky Mount, Virginia. They take good care of me on my New Holland and my Massey Ferguson stuff. Never charged me a dime to come up here an hour and a half away from them and work on my stuff. They've never charged me for it. I know most dealers do. I have a neighbor that has one of these tractors, and he got it from a different dealer, and he's had a few issues, and he has not had nearly as good a luck as I have with them. Um, they want to charge him to come out, and then if he does take the tractor to them, if they work on it and it's not an actual warranty issue, or if they look into the issue he's having, which is warranty issues, he's told me what basically the same problem with the air conditioning that I've had, which is just nitpicky stuff that you can do in 5 minutes. Um, they tell him it's uh, not covered under warranty, and that he has to pay for it out of pocket. But that shouldn't be so. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this video and the parts that go with it when I get them made. So talk to y'all later.
And I'm going to start off with the air conditioner system. The air conditioner system in these tractors, the very first ones that come out, were less than adequate. There was some seals that were missing in the ducts. The air conditioning vents in this tractor are in the top of the cab, which is great. I like air conditioning that blow down from the top all the way around you. This when I get in the cab in a minute, I'll show you where all the vents are. And to me, the best air conditioning is ones that have vents that blow down from the top on straight onto your head and upper body. That's the part of me that I need to keep cool the most. My legs and stuff, it's not such a big deal. Tractors that have the air conditioner down in the dash, they do okay, but that's the only place there's air, is right in front of you, down in the dash. There's no air behind your head or around you or up high. It just don't seem to cool as good, but that's just my opinion. That's coming from Ford. I've run Ford tractors all my life, and most all those were overhead, and those tractors always had, typically, if everything was right, they had excellent air conditioning in them. But a lot of those had the R12 in them, though, and the R12 was much better at cooling than the 134, in my opinion, also. But back to the ducts. They didn't have the seals on the ducts from the factory, and they had a weaker blower motor. Some of them did. The very first tractors, I believe, had a weaker blower motor. They went back and they updated some of the blower motors that needed to be updated, and they went back in the first tractors that didn't have the seals around the ducts, resealed the ducts. This happened. This was done by the dealer for people that had complaints about the air conditioning. Now, I know my dealer done several of them. This tractor was already done from the factory. This tractor was built, I'm trying to remember, I think it was like 12-17. This is a model year 2018, but it was manufactured in 2017-12. And I'm going to assume, because right here it says year 2018, but here it says manufacturer 2017-12. And yes, these tractors are made in China, but I would not let that deter you from buying one. I've had a couple of New Holland tractors that were built in Italy that weren't or aren't as assembled or as nice as this tractor is. The T4 115 I don't think is quite the tractor that this tractor is. Even though it was a 15 more horsepower, this tractor, I believe, is made a little bit better. I could be proven wrong over time, but I've got 200 hours on it. I've had less trouble with it than I did in 200 hours on the T4. This tractor is definitely more comfortable to operate, and I just like it better. It's more compact, but it's a whole lot. The cab is more spacious. I mean, it's kind of a mind boggler. But anyway, back to what. Let me try to stay on track. The air conditioning. Apparently, if you got one after this one, you don't need the updates to the air conditioning. Before this one, I'm not sure when the break was. I didn't get with my dealer and find out. I'm not sure when they actually just started doing the updates to the seals and the fans and everything at the factory. But this one already had it done. The dealer didn't have to do it. But there's a couple other things about the air conditioning that can make it not work as well. One thing you can do to assure that the heat will not bother the air conditioning. If you go right here's the def tank, but right over here, let me get a light. Here's the heater valves going up into the cab. When it's hot outside, you don't want hot water circulating into the cab. Right there where my flashlight is shining. There is a red valve. It's on right now because the weather is getting cooler and I was using the heat. But turn that valve off when it's hot outside. That valve right there will shut the hot water off going to the heater core in the cab. So there's actually two valves that control hot water going into the heater core. That one right there, when you cut it off, it's not going to leak water unless there's something terrible wrong with it. But it's not going to leak any water and let hot water circulate into the cab, which is going to make sure that everything coming out of that cab is coming through is cold air. Because what happens is there is another valve that's up here in the cab, and it is cable operated from the knob in the cab that you turn to adjust the temperature. So basically what you have in there is you have an evaporator core, which is what cools the air for the air conditioning. Well, right next to it, there's a heater core. So the air goes through both of them all the time. Well, if you have the air conditioner on and you want cold air, you turn the knob up here, and there's a cable that cuts a valve off to the heater core. Well, those valves are notorious, those cable operated valves are notorious for leaking. Now, whether they leak because of a mechanical problem or if they leak because the cable isn't adjusted just right, that second option is probably more likely the culprit. The cable may not be adjusted to where when you turn that knob all the way, that it shuts the water off completely through the heater core. So what you have is the air conditioner core, or the evaporator core, excuse me, it's cooling the air, and then the air goes through the heater core, which may be leaking just a little bit of water through, a little bit of hot water from the engine, and heating that air back up as it passes through there, through the heater core, and then it comes out into the cab as lukewarm air. And you're like, well, the air isn't very cold. So the way to overcome that, turn that valve off right there. When it's hot weather, just turn it off, and then you know for sure that everything coming out of your vents is just air conditioned. There's no heat influence to it. Most of the time you'll find that you'll get colder air by doing that. Another thing that I figured out about this tractor pretty quickly, I got it when it was right between being warm and cold weather, kind of like it is now. And I didn't want to turn the heater valve off over there because sometimes I needed it to be warm. I needed a little bit of warm air, and then as the sun would come up, I would need more air conditioning. So I noticed that all I was getting was heat unless I turned that valve off over there, and it didn't seem to matter where I turned the knob up here. It was just heat. And you don't want to have to, in the spring and in the fall, you don't want to have to be going out and getting and turn that valve on and off all the time. Well, that's aggravating. So I decided to pull this thing right here. You can pull this thing right here out very simply. It just comes right out. See how that this pops right out there? Let me get some light up here. You get to looking around back here, and you'll notice there's a cable connected to, right here's your heat and air conditioning, or your heat air conditioning knob. This one turns the compressor on and off. This one controls, all it controls is a hot water valve, which is in the cab back here, back there in the heat box, heat and air conditioning box. All right, this cable controls that valve. So all you're basically doing is turning the hot water on and off to the heater core with this cable. Well, this cable, and pull yours out. If you're having trouble controlling the temperature, pull this thing out. Just take your fingernails and pull this controller out. Make sure that this cable sheath is still connected to the valve, right, to the control unit right here. Because what happened to mine is the sheath had slid out of this clamp right here. And I know this video is not the best because the light's too bright and I ain't got enough hands to hold everything. But this cable, this sheath had slipped out of this clamp. And when I would turn the knob, it would just be moving the whole cable back and forth instead of just sliding this wire that's inside the sheath, which is what it's supposed to do. So what would happen is the knob was effectively not doing anything. So that's how it came to me from the factory. So all I had to do was get up in here, and all I had to do was go up there and loosen that Phillips head screw that you're looking at. And I had to slide the sheath back up in it, get it adjusted, tighten that screw up. Now, it still has trouble occasionally. It'll pop back out. That sheath is just barely clamped. The sheath isn't long enough. But it has been holding for quite some time the last time I've done it. If it keeps giving me trouble, I'm going to modify the sheath or the clamp one where it'll hold much better. I just hadn't done it yet. But this thing is very easy to pull out with your fingernails. You just pull it, snap it out, and you can look back there and see if you got a problem. Alright, so I got that snap back in there, and this thing right here, it's working like it should. It controls the hot water. So that's all good. That is the things you need to look for on this tractor if you're having trouble with the air conditioning, is those two valves. The one that controls the valve, this valve, the cable operated valve, make sure it's connected. And if it's hot weather, you need just purely air conditioning, cut the heater valve off down there, and it's going to make things a lot nicer. Now, well, I told you I would show you where the vents are. You can see there's one here next to the rear window. There's two right here. This tractor's a little different than some of them because it has the Vizio roof. There's normally 4 vents here. I don't really care for the tractors that don't have the Vizio roof. On this particular tractor, the roof comes way down, seems like, and it seems to block. If you're taller, if your torso is taller, or if you like to run the seat up higher, that seemed to really block a lot of vision for me. I ran one without the Vizio roof for a couple of days before I bought this one. I have a video of that review way back on my channel, but I didn't really care for that. This for me is a whole lot better. It makes the cab feel bigger to me. But anyway, yeah. Also, you can see the loader a lot better. There's another vent here, here, and here. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how do you defrost the windows? Well, these pieces right here on both sides, they're defrost vents. You look up here, you see these vents, and over here, these are vents. All right, even up here in the for the Vizio panel, there's vents up there that defrost the window. Now, I will say one thing about those defrost vents. Oh, and they're also over here. They blow on the doors and keep the doors defrosted on both sides. But I will say one thing about that, there's no way to cut the defrost off. They did not put any type, and I wish they had done this. They should have put some type of valve that you could have cut off on either side. I don't know how they could have made it, but I'm sure they could have done it. You needed a valve to cut the defrost off going to the windows. And the reason I say that is because when it's in hot weather and you got the heater valve shut off, in the evenings when the weather starts cooling off, it still may be 75 degrees outside, so you still need air conditioner. But what happens is the cold air blowing on the windows causes condensation on the outside of the windows, kind of like a cold drink, you know, and your cup starts sweating on the outside. Well, the same thing happens to these windows when there's cold air blowing on them from in here, and it can get so bad sometimes that it'll start blocking your vision in these areas right here. But it only does that like at dusk or at nighttime. If you're running the air conditioner at nighttime, it'll fog up these areas, and there's nothing you can really do about it other than cut the air conditioner off or cut the heater valve on back down there and try to turn some heat to it a little bit. But it's just a small complaint. It's not bad enough to really file a complaint about it to Massey Ferguson or anything. But I wish there was a way to cut those ducts off when you don't need them. Okay, another thing. Let's go to the next thing. I did make a list so I wouldn't hopefully forget anything. Let me look at it and I'll get right. I'm glad I looked at my list, because there was another thing about the air conditioning that I need to talk about. Oh, and this vent right here, it's not actually a vent. This is an intake for recirculation. You can cut it off or open it up. So in other words, that lets air recirculate from the inside back through the air conditioning and the heat, or you can cut it off and it has to pull all the air from the outside. That's what this is. It doesn't actually blow air. That's what the round ones are for. Okay, so one other thing I had trouble with this tractor and the air conditioner, it was freezing up on me. If I run it on position 1 and 2, I was okay. It did not freeze up. But if I went to 3 and 4, the longer they would run, the longer the air conditioner would run, the warmer it would get in here. And it wouldn't make sense to me. Sometimes it would just start getting teetotally hot in here. Seemed like the hotter the weather was, the worse it would do it. And I was like, something is not right, because I could turn it off. I could turn the air conditioner off for about 5 minutes, cut it on, cut it back on. Then it would be freezing cold in here again, even though it was hot, really hot outside. It would start getting cold, and it would stay cold in here for an hour or so, and then it would start getting warmer, and start getting warmer, and start getting warmer, and then you're like, what is going on? What was happening was it was freezing up. The evaporator core was freezing up because the AC compressor was not shutting off. It wasn't cycling. So what I ended up doing, I talked to the dealer, and he hadn't heard of the problem on this particular tractor, not yet. He has now, because I think he asked me about working on one the other day. He said though that on other tractors he's had that happen on, you could go in there and to where the evaporator core is, you have to go in where the evaporator core is and move the sensor to a colder spot in the evaporator. In other words, there's a little sensor bulb in there that senses how cold the evaporator is to keep it from freezing up. Well, it may be right in the center where all the air is blowing over the the fins, and it's not letting it get cold enough to cut the compressor off. But where the air's not blowing around the edges of the fins, there's not as much airflow on the evaporator. Them areas of the evaporator are getting so cold that they're starting to freeze up. Then eventually all the water around them is freezing up. It starts blocking airflow through the evaporator, and then once that starts happening, it just kind of compounds, because the less airflow you get through it, the colder it can get and more water can freeze up on it. You know, and the water I'm talking about is the condensation water that accumulates on an evaporator. That's what you see dripping out from underneath your car or your tractor or whatever when you got the air conditioner running. That was freezing up and causing an ice blockage, I guess you would call it, over top of the evaporator, and won't let air blow through it. So you can feel up here, and it feels like pretty cold air, but you're getting less and less air. And then eventually it's hot in here, and you're like, oh, what's going on? I did figure out how to fix that. And we'll go back here to the back of the tractor, and I'll show you how to get to it to fix it. Okay, we're now on the top of the tractor, or this is the top of the cab. This panel right here is over top of the HVAC unit, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning unit. So what you need to do to get to it is take all these bolts around this thing off. This cap right here just pops off, and you set it out of the way. Then what you got is a big black box here that everything is inside. You still can't see the evaporator or the heater core or anything like that, because it's all inside of another box inside here. But somewhere right in this area, there is a small wire connected to a black box, and that wire goes inside of the big black box, and it has a piece of like tar, best I could describe it, it's like roofing tar over it to keep air from escaping out the hole where the wire goes in. And I want to get down off this tractor because that's about all I can show you about it. But anyway, once I figured out that that was the sensor that controlled how cold that the evaporator gets, what I did, and my dad suggested this, I had already taken the tar off, pulled the sensor completely out, and looked at it. And I thought, and it was way down in there. It was down inside, that sensor was way down in there, maybe 5 inches or something. And I had pulled it out, and I looked at it, and I thought, how am I going to move this thing to a different spot in the evaporator without taking this black box all apart? It has 60 screws in it, and then it just didn't look like it was going to be easy to take apart. I really didn't want to take it apart. So my dad comes in, and I'm telling him the issue, and he said, well, how deep was that sensor down in that box? I said, I don't know, 5 inches maybe. He said, why don't you try just pulling the sensor up a couple inches and see if it makes a difference. Okay, so that's what I did. It was stuck way down in the box. I just pulled the wire up a couple inches, and I had the tractor running. I had the AC compressor running. I pulled that thing up a couple inches, and I just sat there and waited, and the AC compressor shut off. A few seconds later, it come back on, and it shut off again. And that's what it's supposed to do. Before, it was staying on continuously, and it never would shut off and let the evaporator warm up a little bit to keep the ice from forming on it. So, whether you care to know that much information or not, there it is. I also put a thermometer in the vent. Before, I was getting readings down to like 36, 34 degrees coming out of the vent until it froze up, and then the temperature started going up to like 50 degrees and above. Because I had it in the shop here running on 4, fan speed 4 for a long time, and it did freeze up on me while I was working on it. That's what I wanted to see. So what I did After I moved that up, I got back in the tractor and I was checking the temperature, and it got down to about 40 degrees and the compressor would cut off, which that's perfect. You want it about 40 degrees, 39 degrees, something like that. It's about as low as you can go at that vent without the evaporator freezing up. And that's what I was getting. And the compressor would shut off, the air temperature would raise up to about 44 degrees, the compressor would come back on, start cooling back down to 40 degrees, shut off. So once I decided that solved my air conditioning problem, I took a zip tie and I put it around that wire as tight as I could get it so it couldn't slide back down in there over time. And then I put that tar back around the hole. I put the cap back on, and I hadn't had the air conditioner freeze up since. So if you've been having that trouble, that's one way you can solve that. Hopefully your tractor, you can solve it the same way that I did, because if not, it's going to be a little more difficult. All right, let's move on to the next thing. I'm going to get me a water and take a break from talking here.
Dealer is excellent. My dealer is Franklin Welder. Franklin Welder. Crap. Oh, me. My dealer is Franklin Welding and Equipment.